News, absolutely phenomenal news. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, RFK Jr., to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Todd Blanche, the number 2 at the DOJ, Department of Defense, Deputy Attorney General. You have a dream team that the wonderful, morally superior can't stand. This is the worst nightmare, the absolute worst nightmare politically for wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrats who have zero concept oftentimes of national intelligence, who lost the popular vote. So let's just look at why Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Todd Blanche, and you'll listen to all of them in a second. But let's just give some context here. Hit subscribe. Your super chat is greatly appreciated. We're going to have a very awesome and amazing and wonderful and prosperous 4 years. Finally, the adults are in charge. The people who thought of themselves as adults lost. The Democratic Party lost the popular vote. Every battleground state, the Senate, the House, and the Supreme Court. They have it's a 6-3 Republican or Trump Republican or Republican conservative Supreme Court. Democrats cheated Bernie Sanders, and they railroaded Biden, and now they've lost almost all of their political, they've lost completely and entirely their political momentum. They don't have any capital left politically. All they can do is the usual complaining and hyperbolic histrionics. The apoplectic response of the wonderful, morally superior is hilarious. Hit subscribe. Let's listen to JFK really quickly, and we'll get to Tulsi Gabbard and Todd Blanche.
So, I know you've lived a lot of your life in Washington, D.C. What did you make of the fact that the Washington Post announced inexplicably on Friday, we're not going to endorse a candidate? And then Jeff Bezos has come out and he said, you know what? We want people to decide on their own.
The Washington Post, when I was little, did not endorse candidates, and it only started doing that recently. The problem I have with the Washington Post is the bias in the newsroom.
Front page.
Right. Because traditionally you would have an unbiased reporting by the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then the editorial board would meet and vote, and they'd endorse a candidate, and there was supposed to be a Chinese wall between them. But in recent years, they have become blatantly partisan, and I think that's a tragedy for the news, because there's really, there is very, very few sources of nonpartisan news left. Except, of course, right here.
All right, there you go. Good answer.
How do you feel, though, about the media at large, though? Painting the Trump supporters that you were at that event in New York, at Madison Square Garden. They're painting them all as Nazi supporters, as racist. And this used to be your party. It used to be the part of inclusion, of open debate. But that's changed. Why?
Yeah, at the beginning of this campaign, I made a statement about Anne Frank during a speech, and I wasn't referring to saying anything reminded me of Nazism. I was talking about the rise of totalitarian systems of AI and facial recognition that give totalitarian systems the capacity to control so much of our behavior and to surveil us.
Nobody is more totalitarian than the modern-day Democratic Party. They censor through social media algorithms, through influence within media. You couldn't talk about, for example, the New York Post reporting on Hunter's laptop. That is called censorship. Okay, age-related material, if you say, well, you can read this or watch this, but not for a certain age, that is not censorship. That's just common sense. And so Democrats say, oh, you're into censorship, so it's the same thing. It's like, no. It's not the same thing, and don't be an imbecile. What Democrats did is they blame the Kremlin for everything. If they stub their toe, if you stub your toe, it's because of the Kremlin. If you learn any corruption within the Democratic Party. That's a Kremlin operation to inform you of how, despicable Democrats are, thus influencing you to vote for Trump. Nobody believed this. People cared about inflation, interest rates, endless military quagmires. That's why Trump won. The Democratic Party today wants to silence speech, curtail silence speech. They excommunicate and they shun and they oust anyone who blasphemes within their own political party. You have friends, family disowning other friends and family. Okay, they're totally, utterly incapable of listening to another viewpoint. It's like a religion for them. And so they're the ones also that are just fine with endless military conflict, invasions around the world. And so then Trump signed prison reform legislation. He wants to bring Americans home from endless military conflict. He does not want to invade countries. He does not want to start military quagmires. He's the least militant candidate who signed prison reform legislation and who got a greater share of the non-white vote. So how on earth is he authoritarian? But then again, a lot of people in media lack the knowledge. If you're calling Trump a despot or an authoritarian, you don't know, you're ignorant of history. You don't know what actual authoritarians did. They acted closer to the Democratic Party. Okay, there are articles talking about how you should not date people and disown friends and family. That's what a cult does. That's what an authoritarian does. And they're the most militant political party. That's why you had Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and others choose Harris. So it's like you don't know what an authoritarian is if you think Trump is an authoritarian and Democrats are not.
And for about 5 months after that, I was called an anti-Semite for invoking the Nazi era. And here you have the leading Democrats in the last couple of weeks and the press. MSNBC has been really appalling.
Insane. Mm-hmm. And the vice president. And
thank you to my super chat, Paul Bartlett. As always, thank you so very much. And to everyone here, thank you for the kind words always.
There's no link between. I don't even think Madison Square Garden existed in 1939.
Right, it came 1968.
A figure to Hitler.
Hi, I'm JT, and I made Result Hunter.
Great honor. I've been friends of his for a long time. And I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines. The only thing I don't think I'm going to let him even get near is the liquid gold that we have under our feet.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, he always says that, and I get it. But what he's right is, we have the sickest children in the world right now. There's nobody in the world that has that. When I was in Europe, you have the same.
Seems pretty simple.
The same cereal. By the way, President Trump was cooking him at McDonald's the other day and giving people French fries. And people criticized me, and they said, well, he's out there giving fast food. And I said, I don't have anything against fast food. I'm against food that has seed oils. When I was a kid, McDonald's was made with tallow fat. That was good for you. And your body needs that. It makes you healthy.
It's great.
Why aren't we making with tallow fat again? In England, McDonald's has a McDonald's French fry has 3 ingredients in it. It's like potato, sugar, and some, oil or tallow. Yeah, salt. Sorry. Potatoes, salt, and some tallow fat. In our country, it has 17 ingredients.
Wow.
Oh, and none of them are good for you.
Okay, well, obviously something's got to give. Lynn, right in the front row, RFK, has got a question for you. Lynn?
Hi. I grew up a Bostonian where the Kennedy name is sacrosanct. How did you get the courage to stand up against the liberal media and your famous family?
Well, I was led one thing to another. I saw what the truth that was happening to our kids. And I had to make a choice between whether I was going to try to help people get healthy again. And then there were other reasons that I left the Democratic Party. The party that I grew up with was the party of peace. It was the party of constitutional rights and civil rights. It was the party of that stood up to Wall Street and the big corporations. Today's Democratic Party is the party of war. It's the party of censorship. It's the party of surveillance.
This is all true. Today's Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party of 30 plus years ago. It's just not. The same Democrats who opposed Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld are the same Democrats who like Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, proving that in many cases it was only partisanship. If you're a Democrat and you opposed Bush 24 years ago, or 22 years ago, you did so because he had an R next to his name, not because you cared about ending wars.
It's the party of big tech, big ag, big banking, the military-industrial complex, and big ag, and big food, and big pharma. And so I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left
You
me.
tried to run as a Democrat, and they locked you out. They wouldn't put you on the ballot.
I think we have one more question. Where's Janelle? Janelle on this side of the room. Hey, Janelle, what is your question?
About 100,000 schools participate in the USDA's national lunch program during the year. If you're given a position by the Trump administration in the agricultural department, what will you do to improve school lunches?
I'll get processed food out of school lunch immediately. About half the school lunch program goes to processed food. About 70% of food stamps go to processed food.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, who was against that? Oh, that's right. Democrats are against this, very much against. Somehow, this is bad.
10% of food stamps go to sugar drinks, to sodas. We're creating diabetes problem in our kids by giving them food that's poison, and I'm going to stop that.
Robert, we got to let you go. But quick question. You were talking about the difference from the McDonald's here versus another country, or the Fruit Loops here versus another country. What's the reason why? Like, if they know how to make it already, why aren't we doing it?
It's because it's cheaper for them to put the chemicals in. And President Trump wants to get the chemicals out. And he wants to make us healthy because in the long run, that's cheaper for our country.
It's America. America is the best at everything. We need to be the best at food, too.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, RFK Jr. I'm Steve.
What a dream team, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Gaetz. The only one better than Matt Gaetz would have been Rudy Giuliani as Attorney General. And I'm praying Kash Patel. From what we're hearing, Kash Patel is the next director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm praying that happens.
We've accepted a narrative that despite an actually great economic recovery, the vibes don't feel good. So we want to reject it and get something else. What will the future hold now that America has just decided that we're going to F around and find out?
Nobody trusts media anymore because of that type of commentary.
I don't even know what that means. But the left is blaming everyone, everything, trying to find something to blame for Kamala's loss. And they still haven't realized that they're just totally out of touch with the concerns of everyday Americans.
Somebody who was going to be voting for Kamala Harris came up to me and said, "Oh my God, Trump's going to win." I go, "Why is that?" He goes, I went to the grocery store. Butter's over $3. I kind of laughed.
The $7.
What's that?
The $7.
What's that? Butter is $7?
Yeah.
What? Is it framed in gold?
Wait. Okay. Did he not realize that gas had gone up? I realize that gas goes up like several times a week. Joining me now, Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat, co-chair of Trump's transition team.
I love Tulsi Gabbard. I think that when I was on the left, I wrote that she was just amazing in the Huffington Post. She's fantastic. Thank God she's the director of national intelligence. Every single person that set up and framed Trump, that tried to lie and deceive the country and blame everything on the Kremlin. If you broke the law, very likely Matt Gaetz is going to indict you. Very likely, if you broke the law. If you happen to break the law, trying to lie to the country and create a Cold War hysteria, you will be very likely indicted in this administration.
Okay, Tulsi, maybe that was like a joke. I can't really tell, but it does kind of bring to bear what's really at stake in politics in general. Do you really get what bothers the American people and have a solution to fix it? But they still think this is largely a communications problem with the American people. Your response to the head scratching on the other side?
Yeah, Laura, you know that clip you played from MSNBC first really kind of said it all. Is they continue to think that they are awesome. They did a great job. Look at this huge economic recovery. Why don't the American people know this or appreciate this? They are so out of touch with the hardships and the reality that the American people have been living through over these last 4 years. They sit in their ivory tower eating their cake and look down on the people who are struggling and suffering, saying, well, gosh, I don't know what's wrong. The reality is that President Trump went out and traveled across the country. He listens, he sees people, and he recognizes the challenges they face and tells them that he will work for them. He's got a 4-year track record of doing that during his first administration. So they believe him when he says, I'm going to bring down the cost of living. They believe him when he says, I am committed to preventing World War III. He's the old Kamala Harris. I don't think she ever once mentioned nuclear war, not during her 4 years as vice president, not during this campaign.
Kamala Harris doesn't care. That's not a disrespectful state. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Kamala Harris. She doesn't care. These things that Tulsi Gabbard are talking about, that Trump, that RFK Jr., that Matt Gaetz, that everyone on the Trump side, the majority of the electorate, the border, Democrats do not care. It's not a concern. So I'm not being disrespectful or belligerent or rude or mean-spirited. The border, possible nuclear confrontation, inflation, interest rates, these are not national security issues to the Democratic voters. It's not a concern of theirs. It's not their concern. So when you say, if you voted Trump and you say, how could anyone vote Harris or vice versa? The Trump voter looks at the border, looks at national security issues from a traditional vantage point. Okay, we don't want mutually assured destruction. We don't want endless invasions. We don't want global catastrophe, quagmires, foreign policy debacles. Democrats don't care about foreign policy. That's not part of their calculus. They just care about one thing primarily, influencing politics. It's a religion. So inflation could go up. There could be global calamities. As long as certain hot button issues are addressed, their sensibilities are addressed, and Trump, the menace to the entire universe, is no longer in power. But that mentality they had led to Trump getting the popular vote, the Senate, the House, the presidency, every battleground state, and, of course, the Supreme Court.
President Trump, almost everywhere he went, talked about the seriousness of the threat of nuclear war and that we are closer to the brink than ever before because of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and that he'll do all that he can to prevent nuclear war. These are the kinds of things that drove people from across party lines, from across the demographics, to say, yes, my vote is with Donald Trump.
You know, I think a lot of folks in the Democrat Party weren't as much concerned about making America economically strong again, or certainly not making America great again. But they were very worried about making Ukraine great and safe again. And this is some of the reaction.
One of our closest democratic allies, Ukraine, now depends on a man who has criticized Ukraine.
The American people great and safe again. And this is some of the reaction.
Donald Trump is standing with the American people, Laura. I was with people in Western North Carolina, in and around the communities surrounding Asheville, the day before Election Day. And you know what I heard from them? They're coming home from funerals of their loved ones. They are telling me, hey, we still have over 500 people who have not been found in the wake of Hurricane Helene, and it's been over a month.
And one of the great scandals in recent memory is how the Biden administration treated the people of North Carolina, Georgia, and other states affected by Helene.
Why aren't those talking heads talking about the American people who need a president who has their back? President Trump has their back, and this is why he's earned their trust and their confidence.
Tulsi, and I know you're not going to answer this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Can we see you, or will we see you perhaps in the administration?
Director of National Intelligence, overseeing every intelligence agency. Thank God. Nobody's more qualified. When you see these angry, miserable, pathetic, disingenuous, deceitful, sore losers, you know, the wonderful, highly educated journalists and Democrats and pundits, and they say, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. Oh, Matt Gaetz, Attorney General. Like, no. We didn't bother you when you picked all of the incompetent people. Well, actually, when Democrats picked all the incompetent leaders that they picked for Biden's cabinet, who likely had to do a lot more. I mean, was Biden leading the country? That's a rhetorical question. If you're a Democrat and you stumble upon this, do you think Joe Biden was actually leading the country? Do you honestly think that? Okay, so we didn't really have a leader. We likely had a bunch of incompetent, very incompetent people in charge. And there was so much incompetence, but again, they don't care as long as they're in charge. They're no longer in charge. Tulsi Gabbard is a veteran. She wants to end wars. This is a moral imperative. If you don't want to end military quagmires, you're on the wrong side of history.
That's a question only President Trump can answer.
Will you take, like a lower level job, like special assistant to the undersecretary at HHS? I mean, like with something like that? I mean, I'm just teasing. Because he doesn't like strong, intelligent women.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Clearly. And congratulations to Susie Wiles. She is fantastic. I've so enjoyed working with her. She is a straight shooter, and I'm looking forward to seeing her as chief of staff.
Well, her source was quoted as saying, the clown show is basically not going to have access to the Oval Office. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but the words clown show was used. Is that a good thing?
Yeah, she works very well with President Trump. I think she is of great credit to winning this campaign and being able to make sure that the train didn't go off the rails. And so, I think she's going to do a fantastic job as White House Chief of Staff. President Trump seeks counsel from those that he wants to, but Susie Wiles will provide great leadership on his behalf in running that place.
Tulsi, always great to see you. Congratulations, all the hard work you put in.
Hey, Sean.
Matt Gaetz and Todd Blanche, 4 years of just awesome, amazing news on this channel. Hit subscribe if you're new.
Get a fair trial?
I mean, no, I don't think so. I mean, we've been saying for over a year that we couldn't get a fair trial in Manhattan.
This is the number 2 in the DOJ after Matt Gaetz. And there's like a 4 or 5 senator lead. So you can have the usual suspects. I'm not voting for Matt Gaetz. Good, don't vote. Good. Just pretty soon, eventually, your Senate seat will be up and you'll get a Trump Republican in the Senate. And it's all good. You have 2 red states Arizona and Georgia, these are conservative red states by and large. The Democratic Party in these states are more conservative, a lot more conservative than Kamala Harris. They're red states. You should really have 4 extra senators, 4 extra Republican senators. So you're looking at Georgia, you're looking at Arizona, and then, you know what, the liberal states with Republican senators, a lot of the Northeast states that have a couple of them, or you know, one of them in particular, I'm not going to give the names of the senators, but there are 2 senators in particular that don't want to vote for Trump's cabinet. They don't have to. There's already a 2, that you would need 2 or 3 more senators not to appoint Gates, and Trump has the political will. He has the popular vote, every battleground state, the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the presidency. So this is Todd Blanche. He's top attorney as the number 2 of the DOJ. Thank God.
We couldn't get a fair trial with the judge, and it played out in lots of ways exactly as we expected.
Was this judge fair? Did he follow the rule of law?
Look, I'm not going to criticize the judge right now. I think that there were a lot of decisions that he made leading up to the trial, which really hurt us at trial, that we very much disagree with. They're part of the public record. Everything from he not recusing himself to the decisions he made during the omnibus motion process, the motion in limine process. And what happens in a trial is you show up for trial, and all those decisions that have been made in the weeks and months leading up to trial, they matter. The evidence that can come in, the evidence that cannot come in. And when we showed up at trial, that's where we really felt that we weren't getting a fair shake.
You believe the judge should have recused?
Look, we filed 2 separate motions saying that the judge should have recused himself. He didn't. It's something that we went to the first department to appeal it before the trial started. I expect that'll be one of the things that we appeal.
So you believe this judge was biased because of his donations and because of his family financial interest in the outcome of this case?
Look, our system of justice requires not only the that a judge that is actually biased to recuse himself, but that a judge that even has the appearance of bias to recuse himself. And our papers are public. We felt very strongly that there was an actual bias that this judge had. And even if not an actual bias, that there was certainly a perception of bias. He disagreed. He's a judge, and in our system, he gets to make that decision, and it's something that we get to appeal, but we certainly felt pretty strongly about our position.
You believe Donald Trump's constitutional rights were violated?
In many ways, yes.
How so?
Well, if you look at, for example, the gag order that was put in place, and you had a situation.
So you have Todd Blanche. This is the number 2 at the Department of Justice. This is the man who is going to back up Matt Gaetz. So, I mean, this is like a dream team. It's the worst nightmare for Democrats because indictments are coming. Indictments are imminent. If you really watch this channel for a long time, you remember when I first started writing, but they are actually imminent now because people did break the law going after Trump.
Where President Trump, who's on the campaign trail and is trying to compete with voices that are saying things every day that he cannot respond to without the risk of being fined, which he was, or going to prison for violating it. That affects not only President Trump, that affects every voter, whether they're going to vote for President Trump or against President Trump. That affects every single voter in this country because they don't get to hear from the candidate. We very much disagree with that order. We appealed that as well. There was a lot about what happened over the past year that, I sit here tonight. The verdict just came down today, but really there's a lot that's happened over the past year that I think that Americans should look very hard at. Just the whole way this case was charged. The district attorney says that this type of case is a bread and butter, that they do these cases all the time. That is not true. It's just not true. This is a case that the records of President Trump's personal records, his personal checkbook from 2017, is what he was on trial for. That does not happen all the time. It doesn't happen all the time in Manhattan, and it doesn't have to happen all the time in any jurisdiction in this country.
And name an example of it happening to a Democratic politician. Any of Trump's indictments, then the rebuttal is, well, Trump is so unique. No, he's not. How many Democrats looked the other way and had their words utilized by people who caused property damage? How many people who caused property damage that entire summer were bailed out by Democratic Party-linked organizations? There was endless property damage. 19 lives lost. People of color lost their lives, and Democrats stood silent. Businesses owned by people of color were burnt to the ground. Democrats stood silent. And the real bigots and biased and, word that starts with R, the wonderful, highly educated, morally superior Democrats stood by as the country was going down the tubes that summer, curfews everywhere, and they said, no, this has nothing to do with us, has nothing to do with our words. Of course it did. Then, of course, they go after Trump for one day. And then they go after Trump for something that wasn't even an FEC crime. The state of New York has no right it's not constitutional. They don't have the jurisdiction to decide that Trump committed an FEC crime when the Department of Justice, Biden's own Department of Justice, and the FEC dropped the hush money case. There was no, the conviction will be overturned whenever it gets to the Supreme Court. Very likely, the judge himself will just drop the whole thing.
And that's fine. That's fine if you want to indict somebody and go after somebody for conduct that happened in 2017. But I think where it becomes problematic for me as a lawyer is don't look me in the eye and says this is bread and butter. We do this all the time. That we're treating President Trump like we treat anybody else. That's not true. That's not true.
Here was Alvin Bragg just an hour ago.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be back tomorrow. This was absolutely phenomenal. And you see the Atlantic, the national security risk. The Atlantic doesn't really know. None of these publications know what national security is. The border is a national security risk right now because of Biden's policies, Harris's policies, Democrats' policies. Because publications overlook what's taking place at the border. They overlook the endless military quagmires that began under Biden's administration. Anyway, let's hit subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much to my